Supertrainer or Supershoe? That's a question a lot of runners often ask themselves when it comes to racing shoes, but which one is the better choice for you? Today, we're comparing the Nike Vaporfly 4 with the Nike Zoomfly 6. What's up everybody, I'm Eric McIntyre, aka Rad Dad Bod, and you're watching Rad Dad Bod TV, where we review running shoes. And if it's your first time watching one of my videos, you may notice some timestamps below. Feel free to jump around to the various parts of the review, but if you do so, I would sure appreciate if you come back and watch the full video when you get a sec. And if you've been a viewer for a while, but you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so today and turning on those notifications so you get notified every time I drop a new video, which is typically Monday through Friday. Now, before we get into the details of this comparison, some quick disclaimers and disclosures are that I was provided both of these shoes for free for the purpose of review directly from Nike. That being said, I'm not paid, I don't receive talk tracks, talking point, I'm not actually obligated to include the shoes in any specific content or videos, no one watches the videos beforehand, and all thoughts are entirely my own. With that out of the way, let's talk about the quick intended use of these two shoes. So the intended use of these two shoes is a little bit different, which is why some of these specs, price, and different things that we talk about today are going to vary so much, but essentially the Vaporfly 4 is going to be your racing shoe. Now typically the Supershoe is going to be more of a marathon racing shoe, but with the newest update to the Vaporfly, it looks like Nike is actually pushing the Vaporfly 4 as more of a half marathon to marathon shoe. Meanwhile, with the Zoomfly 6, this is going to be kind of your marathon training or your super training shoe. So it's really meant not necessarily to be raced in, though we'll talk about this, you can definitely race in the shoe, but more so to handle the bulk miles of a big training block. That being said, that's how we're going to be looking at these shoes throughout this comparison. Now from a price standpoint, the Vaporfly 4 comes in at $260. Meanwhile, the Zoomfly 6 comes in at $170. So both of those price points are fairly typical for their respective categories. Obviously your premium racing shoe is going to be a little bit more or significantly more expensive, honestly, than your Supertrainer. From a specs perspective, the Vaporfly 4 comes in at a very light 5.9 ounces, which is 167 grams. And then the Zoomfly 6 is 8.6 ounces, which is 244 grams. So still decently light, but not even close to the Vaporfly 4 in overall weight. Then from a stack standpoint, the Vaporfly 6 comes in at 36 in the heel and 30 in the forefoot for a 6mm heel to toe drop. Meanwhile, the Zoomfly 6 comes in at 40 in the heel, 32 in the forefoot for an 8mm heel to toe drop. I'll talk about this more in the actual full review of the Vaporfly 4, which will come in a few weeks. But honestly, the fact that this is not pushing 40mm in the heel is kind of surprising, as most super shoes are trying to kind of push the boundaries or the limits of what is a legal racing shoe. Now from a fit perspective, I would say that the Vaporfly 4 fits true to size lengthwise, and then I would say that it fits narrow throughout the entirety of the shoe. I was actually pretty caught off guard by how narrow the shoe was compared to even previous models I felt like were a little bit more accommodating. Meanwhile, when it comes to the Zoomfly 6, true to size lengthwise as well. And then with the Zoomfly 6, I'd say it actually has kind of a more snug heel, kind of a standard midfoot, and then a decently wide toe box, honestly. I felt like it was a fairly accommodating toe box, at the very least for a Nike. Now moving to the uppers, the Vaporfly 4 has a engineered mesh, and it is very, very lightweight, very, very breathable, very, very minimal. Honestly, the shoe fits almost like a sock, but it has some good structure. And then you have that cushion in the heel, just kind of that cushioning pad, which is popular in a lot of the Vaporfly models. Now the Vaporfly 4, it's going to be super, super breathable. I didn't have any noticeable hot spots or rubbing, even with that kind of heel tab there, which I know some people struggle with that. And I felt like the lockdown was really, really nice as well. The tongue is not gusseted, which I don't know if that's just because the shoe fits so narrow that like it wasn't necessary for a lockdown, but I didn't feel like the tongue was really going anywhere. It stuck in place pretty good overall. But as far as like my experience with the upper, the toe box felt noticeably narrow, right? Like I've worn a couple of different shoes that are maybe considered on the narrower side, but normally I'm still pretty comfortable. I do wonder about my viability in this shoe for longer efforts, half marathon or marathon efforts, just because I did feel like my toes were being a little bit squeezed in it. Moving on with the Zoomfly 6, you have a woven mesh, you kind of have this heel flare. It's obviously a much more robust upper overall. You've got some good cushioning there in the heel, kind of a more standard heel counter, and it does come up a little bit and can cause a little bit of irritation on the ankle bone, but for the most part, I was comfortable. The shoe is not quite as breathable as the Vaporfly 4 upper, but you can get some good lockdown. The tongue is kind of stitched in there. Maybe you would consider that gusseted, but it is a mesh material as well. So the shoe breathes decently, not quite as well as the Vaporfly 4, but it's still a very comfortable and overall like nice experience. Between the cushion in the heel as well as kind of that nice tongue stitched in there, I felt like I got some really good lockdown in the shoe as well and was able to be very, very comfortable overall. Now moving to the midsoles, the Vaporfly 4 has your classic Zoom X with that fly plate in there, which is a carbon fiber plate. And then on the Zoomfly, you have a top layer of Zoom X, so a top layer of that racing foam. You have a carbon fiber plate in the middle, and then you have an SR2 kind of EVA base foam on the bottom for added stability and structure. That's one of the main differences, honestly, between like a race shoe and a Supertrainer. A Supertrainer oftentimes has a dual density foam, one kind of less responsive, more structured foam for increased durability and stability as well throughout training. Now, from a pace versatility standpoint, obviously the Zoomfly 6 is going to be a lot more versatile from that pace standpoint. You can warm up in this shoe just fine, versus with the Vaporfly, you really just want to put this on when you're ready to go, when you're ready to race, and maybe warm up in a different shoe. In fact, if it weren't for the carbon plate in the Zoomfly, like if they just went with a dual density midsole, I would honestly consider this for like long runs, daily training, different things along those lines, because the shoe is very comfortable underfoot. And it's going to be a lot more stable than the Vaporfly overall. The Vaporfly is built on a very narrow base. You can see how it kind of tapers in there in that midfoot area. And so for the most part, the shoe is going to be unstable, but that's pretty typical again for faster racing shoes. And this is really kind of built for a sleeker, faster overall experience. I think when comparing these two midsoles, the Zoomfly 6 is going to be a bouncy experience. You're going to get kind of that bounce and rebound off the ground, versus the Vaporfly 4 is going to be a little bit more of the classic snappy overall experience. So you're going to snap off the ground. I think between the two, the Vaporfly 4 is the faster shoe, but if you're not someone who can handle kind of that narrow base overall, the lack of maybe medial support compared to the Zoomfly 6, then you're not going to be able to really race in this shoe anyway. The other thing to consider is racing foams like PEBA-based Zoom X tend to not have the longest durability, and so you're probably going to get more miles overall out of the Zoomfly 6 when compared to the Vaporfly 4. Now moving to the outsoles, jury's still out on the Vaporfly 4. I didn't have any noticeable slipping, but the material doesn't feel, or the rubber doesn't feel like it would be that grippy on kind of slicker surfaces. So I do worry a little bit about kind of how slick that can get, versus the Zoomfly 6 has phenomenal overall grip and it does really, really well overall. So that waffle pattern, you kind of have a different type of rubber pattern there on the Vaporfly 4, but the waffle pattern on the Zoomfly 6 is a really, really good pattern, and I've run in it in rain and wet conditions, and it grips the road and other surfaces really, really well. Vaporfly 4, again, it uses a blown rubber, and my experience with blown rubber has not been the best. And so again, some concerns, but I haven't had any actual experience where I'm slipping around at all. Now, something of note, it does look like the durability of that exposed foam and then that heel coverage there is a little bit better than previous models. But if you ran in the Vaporfly 3, you know that the heel tends to get really, really torn up. Now, a couple of runs in, I'm not seeing any major wear and tear, but I do expect that the outsole of the Zoomfly 6 is going to be significantly more durable overall. And again, that's just one of the differences that you kind of get when it comes to kind of the premium racing shoe that isn't meant to last as much, but is meant to just optimize for your race. Now, as far as my pick, like me personally, right? So not necessarily like the market as a whole. If I'm choosing between these two shoes, it really kind of depends on what's being asked of me. So if I'm going to go run like a fast 5K or 10K, maybe up to the half marathon, I'm probably going Vaporfly because I'm going to want the faster, sleeker overall shoe. Meanwhile, if I want something for the marathon where, you know, I'm going to be out there for a little bit longer and I need to value comfort a little bit more, then I actually might reach for the Zoomfly. Kind of ironically, I don't feel like the Zoomfly is a real Supertrainer to the Vaporfly anymore. I actually feel like the Zoomfly is more reminiscent of the alphafly in terms of how it bounces off the ground and how it feels underfoot. And so I'll be curious to see if Nike does anything with the Vaporfly, if there's like a separate Supertrainer or something along those lines, or if they're just going to have kind of still your Supertrainer and then the various tiers of super shoes. So you have like the Streakfly for your 5K, you know, the Vaporfly for the 10K half marathon, and the alphafly for the marathon. But in most cases, if I'm racing, I am reaching for the Vaporfly, as it is the faster shoe. It is more of the racing shoe, and it is significantly lighter. And at least for me, I really, really value the weight of a shoe over a lot of other things, honestly. So just some final thoughts. Really interesting direction that Nike is taking with their performance line. you know, I'm hoping to get the opportunity to still review the Streakfly 2. I'm curious how that's going to feel for kind of those shorter, faster races, the 5K, maybe even the 10K, but for me, probably just like more like the mile and the 5K, honestly, since I haven't run in spikes, and so that's almost like a spike with a midsole, to be honest. But it seems like they really are leaning into the Vaporfly being more of a kind of half marathon 10K shoe and the alphafly being the premium marathon shoe. So I think we're going to see those lines kind of start to separate more and more over the next few years. As far as the Zoomfly, I'm excited to see what the update looks like for the Zoomfly 7, whenever that is. I'm not actually sure if that's planned or what a release date might be, but the Zoomfly 6 I thought was a really, really good plated trainer. It was one of the top plated trainers in my mind of 2024, but some of the previous iterations over the last few years weren't super popular. So hopefully they don't screw this one up in the next iteration. They kind of stick to what's worked in the 6. But if you watched this far, I sure appreciate you. Please take a sec and leave a comment. Let me know what I could be doing in these videos to make them as entertaining or fun as possible for each and every one of you. And if you also have some other comparison recommendations or requests, please let me know in the comments. And if I have the shoes and I've run in them so far, I'm happy to be able to record those comparisons for each and every one of you. Also, if you've gotten this far and you haven't yet hit that subscribe button, please consider doing so now and turning on those notifications. And as always, I'll finish out with a question for you, which is, do you tend to race in super trainers or super shoes? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks, everybody.